Hello, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 5 of the Virtual Coffee Podcast. I'm Bekah, and this is a podcast that features members of the Virtual Coffee community. Virtual Coffee is an intimate group of developers at all stages of their coding journey, and they're here on this podcast sharing their stories and what they've learned, and we're here to share it with you. Here with me today is my co-host, Dan.
Thanks, Bekah. Today we talk with Kevin Truong. Kevin is a senior software consultant at Test Double and a coding career coach at his company, Tap Into Tech. We had a really great time talking with Kevin. He shared with us his personal approach to interviewing, as well as some really great methods and approaches for people looking to improve their interviewing game.
We start every episode of the podcast like we start every virtual coffee. We introduce ourselves with our name, where we're from, what we do, and a random check-in question. Today's question is, if you could hang out with any cartoon character, who would you choose and why? So my name is Bekah. I am a front-end developer from a small town in Ohio, and if I could choose any cartoon character, I was never a huge cartoon kid, but I loved the X-Men cartoon, and so Professor X, I always wanted him to be my mentor and teach me all of the things because, I'm pretty sure that I would fit right in there with the X-Men, so...
Hi, I'm Dan. I am from Lakewood, Ohio. I do front-end development. I'm kind of conflicted on this. There's Professor X is, a mentor kind of figure. My first instinct was Optimus Prime, for the same reason. But I also feel like he might not be that fun to hang out with. So if the question is hanging out, then my answer is going to be, you know what I mean? So I think I'm going more. I think I'm gonna go with Raphael from Ninja Turtles, or maybe Michelangelo. I don't know. Same problem with Michael. Raphael's a little serious sometimes, but
yeah, he's kind of
grumpy. The problem is he's grumpy. Everybody our age remembers the movies more than the cartoon. The movies he was really kind of a grumpy jerk, but in the cartoons he was not like that. So I feel like the movies did him wrong. Anyway, Ninja Turtles though I feel like would be a fun hang. So.
I might hang out with the Animaniacs.
If I was going to learn from somebody, it'd be Splinter, but he wouldn't be that fun to hang out with. You know what I mean? So it's
get some looks walking around the street with that. Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah,
either one of the characters, but
Plus, yeah, if you go Transformer, then they can drive you around and stuff too. So that's cool. But yeah, I think Michelangelo is my is going to be my official answer.
Nice. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Truong. I am a software consultant at Test Double, also a coding career coach at my own business, Tap Into Tech. I'm located in New Orleans. Not sure if I said that. And my first answer, and I already told you earlier, was I said SpongeBob, because I was thinking about SpongeBob SquarePants because I grew up watching that a little bit. And I'm like, this is a terrible idea. A, I can't hang out underwater, so this would not be a good idea. And then it's SpongeBob. This isn't a good character to be around. And then a little bit more thought. I'm going to go with Rick from Rick and Morty. I don't know if I could keep up with that kind of person or what kind of crazy antics, or I just feel super inadequate hanging out with him. But I think it'd be fun. It'd be a total 24 hours of craziness. And I think it'd be a wild ride.
Sounds like fun. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Kevin.
Better answers are going to come for all of us after this.
Thanks for being here. We always love to start off with everyone's origin story, where you came from, how you got to this point. So if you want to give us your story, we'd love to hear it.
Sure. I've got a somewhat of a journey. So let's see. I'll start. I'll start off as a kid, maybe in middle school, early high school. I always knew I wanted to do some sort of engineering. It was between computer engineering and electrical engineering. I remember on collegeboard.com comparing majors, whenever I was going to school. And I was like, I really don't want to do coding. So I'm really fascinated with power. So I'll go with electrical engineering. So I kind of start off there. And I've always been fascinated with power, just how power is generated. I love solar energy, wind energy, nuclear, and how it gets distributed to homes. And that was what fascinated me. And, with electrical engineering, there are some programming classes. Now, I've taken a program class before and I hated it. It was in Java. I
Mhm.
would have failed the class if my partner, Dustin, if you're out there listening, like, thanks so much. Like he saved me, but I still hated to program. I hated Java. And that was kind of like my first thing. Like, this is not me. I do not want to learn how to program. This is terrible. But electrical engineering had some programming classes to do some like robotics, a little bit of microcontrollers. And it was those kind of projects that for some reason like gave me my flow state. Like I was staying up late hours working, like I'm gonna figure this out. That was kind of when I got re-exposed to programming a little bit. And then you fast forward a little bit to right out of school, right out of college with my electrical engineering degree. I worked in oil and gas actually. So I was working on the oil rigs, like working in the oil and gas industry, like flying out helicopter rides, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, meaning you're out there for 2 weeks,
Mm.
coming back in, land for 2 weeks. And that was a semi-programming job, right? It was programming, right? We're programming valves, right? The simplest example I can give, like if the pressure in a tank is rising too high, if statement, conditional, right?
Mhm.
Then shut off a pump, right? Or if a fire is detected, throw a bunch of fire water onto onto the platform, kind of thing. So that was kind of another little reintroduction to more programming kind of side of things. And this is kind of where web programming kind of came in. I was working there for 2 years and I'm like watching all these people, like startups happening, like people working from home. None of those like crazy Instagram pictures, like I'm just coding here in my laptop on a hotel pool. Like this could be your life too. And I fell for that. I was like, I want to do this. Like I'm seeing all these $billion startup companies just making websites, web apps. And part of me always knew I wanted to do something on my own. I, for some reason, just put 10 years. Like I'm going to work for 10 years and then I'll go do my own business or something. Thankfully, oil and gas, that job kind of accelerated that. So
Mhm.
I started teaching myself. I was on the oil platform, like, you work for 12-hour shifts and then you kind of go to your bunk and kind of thing. I remember like having my laptop out, teaching myself HTML, CSS, Git, and just kind of like learning that in my spare time. And I remember just like I call this the I guess one of my top dumbest best decisions I ever made is I just quit. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have like a software job lined up, but I was like, I'll figure it out. And I quit to kind of go into training mode, which was learning how to code. Attended a boot camp, and that's where kind of web programming kind of came out at. Um, and then in the meantime, while I was looking for software jobs, I was like consulting, doing freelance gigs, making WordPress sites, like, just kind of saying yes to any opportunity I could, which kind of led to me learning everything I know. Like I think in one of our previous episodes, you guys had a prompt saying yes. Not even Drew who said that, right? Like he just had a prompt saying yes. And that was me. I was just saying yes to every opportunity I could because I don't have a job. I'm just going to figure out this. So I learned WordPress. I learned like someone had a Squarespace site. Never did it, but I'll say I can because I'll figure it
Mhm.
out. And so I was doing that in between. And then I started looking at applying for software jobs and getting better at doing that. Doing boot camp instructor. So I ended up being a boot camp instructor for the boot camp I attended, which led to other roles at other different boot camps. So I got to see different systems and different boot camps. And kind of seeing other people go through the job hunt process as well as doing it myself. So kind of a long-winded origin story, but fast forward to now, I'm a senior software consultant at a great company, using everything I learned, but also all the skills and experience I've learned. I've managed to find a great company of my own and applied for it, and history is history. I'm there.
That's awesome. I love that. I think we both come from different-ish backgrounds, but have similar-ish journeys. And
Yeah.
so, once I left, I taught for 10 years college English. And once I left, it was the same kind of thing. I did the boot camp, but also I was taking jobs. So I was like, can you do a WordPress site? Yeah, I can do a WordPress site. It was like one of
All
the
the
worst things
time.
I've
Yeah.
ever worked on. I did not like WordPress at all. And then
Mm-hmm.
eventually that project got drawn out. And then I was like, well, the WordPress is outdated, so let's just do it in Gatsby. And then like that got outdated. And I'm like, we can move it to Jekyll. Like as I figure out what I like doing and what is valuable to people,
Right.
then I just kind of follow that line of also saying yes. I'm getting a little bit better at saying no to things now, but it's just a lot of fun exploration of trying to figure out, what you're going to do with all of the new things that you've just learned.
Yeah. And a lot of people I coach, they always like say, "Oh, I wasted so much time doing that." And I don't really call those a waste, because now you know exactly what you don't want to do, and it's
100%.
better to do that very early on in your career versus wasting your time dropping something to go chase this and finding out that, oh, this was a terrible idea. So no, it's you always end up where you have to be at. So it always has to happen the way it happened.
So you are a consultant with Test Double, right? And
Yes.
and so Test Double is an agency that does work for other clients, right?
Yes, that is correct.
So with them, you're just doing sort of client where you're doing development and stuff like that. And then you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you founded Tap into Tech.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Tap into Tech is something that came before maybe early 2020, late 2019. It was something I've always done. That's why I don't really have a hard date. So
sure.
with
Yeah.
my years as a boot camp instructor, I've always just had mentees, I'm going to call them, but just people in my circles that needed jobs. And it kind of just started off with just emails back and forth, random communities and Slack, and just messaging back and forth, text messaging, just like, hey, I have this interview. Like, what should I do? Does this resume look good? And I've always just had a fascination with that. And the idea of Tap into Tech came in. I was giving a tour at a local company here in New Orleans with my current cohort at the time, and it was about 6-7 different people in this cohort. And we went to go tour this company that was a software company, and they're literally telling us like, yeah, like just finding talent in New Orleans is tough. Like there's just not enough good people in the city. And I'm like sitting looking at my class, I'm like, not everyone's 100% ready, but I'd bet if you gave this person a shot, this person would fly. I'd bet with this other person with maybe 2 months of actual more production ready work, as I like to call it, they would be someone who could like be coached and do well at this company. And that's where it kind of sparked where I realized that where boot camps are missing at, right? They're teaching the technical skill side of things, but what does production ready look like in the real world, right? Like I don't want to bash on anyone, but anyone can make a weather app if you follow a tutorial. Anyone can consume a weather API and throw it out there if they follow the tutorial. A to-do list, those kind of apps are all very trivial. But what does actual production look like? And boot camps, I think, fail at teaching that. Oh, let me say that some boot camps fail at teaching that. So I've realized that I wanted to fill in that gap. I wanted to fill in what's your 80% of the way there. What's that last very important 20% look like? So I started just kind of curating, finding out the needs of certain people and kind of inviting them to this group of, hey, let's do this together. Let's work on this and let's get you a tech job.
I think that's really cool. I imagine you lots of times were giving very similar advice to different people, based on where they were in their journey, and I think that's great. Like being able to tie that into basically a service you can provide to lots of people.
And Kevin, you and I had talked, this was a while ago, I think, about some of the major problems that we're seeing with boot camps or students who are coming out of boot camps. There's a lot of promises that boot camps give, and there's a lot of people out there saying, oh, there's so many jobs in tech, just go to a boot camp, right?
Right.
And yeah, like there's a lot of senior dev jobs out there, but the opportunities for junior developers, there are not that many, and you really have to be able to differentiate yourself. So I guess maybe where I want to start is, what do you see as the biggest problem or challenge that people coming out of boot camps face as they're trying to find that first job where there's a lot of competition?
Yeah, it's a good question. I fight this every day. So I work on eliminating all of that with people every single day. So I think the problem is, let's say we'll start with a typical boot camper kind of thing. I call it production ready, right? Like let's say it's a 3-month course. You walk out with 3 portfolio pieces. But at that point, there's like, our users, if you had 1,000 users on that portfolio piece, would it be ready for that? I would wager most of the time it's a no, right? I would wager that, is it something that people could use and get something valuable out of? And I'll start with this one concept. That's one of my main concepts of what that I try to teach is, I call it flipping the script, right? Imagine the perfect job landed right in front of you right now. The hiring manager is asking you, would you be ready to take this job? Again, I'd wager most people, some people would be, most people would probably lose that opportunity because they weren't just that production ready. They may not convey themselves right. Maybe their online presence didn't feel right. So it didn't look experienced enough for this hiring manager to pick them. And so I start with one, just kind of filling in what that experience looks like. In some ways, it's starting with a passion project. I know that term gets used way too like a passion project, but then really taking that project and making it something valuable, useful, where someone could say, dang, a hiring manager saw this on your, like back to that example, hiring manager just saw you, hey, I have this live website up right now. You can try it out. We can walk through it if you want. And that says, damn, I need to hire Bekah. I need to hire Dan, right? Like there's so, and that, I admittedly, I don't think that obstacle is that tall, right? It's doable. It's challenging, but it's doable enough where someone says, wow, this is well thought out. It's well designed. It shows that this person can hook up a domain, can deploy an app, and can really work with this technology. Let's say React, right? Like I need to have this person on my team, right? Those are the kind of things that I try to get people to aim for, right? Like I need you to be able to go in front of someone and say, yes, I need to have this person on my team. Another one, technical side of skills is just communication skills. I feel like that's something that definitely doesn't get touched on. Some boot camps do good at it. Some, most, let me say this, do not. They don't even touch on it. Once they get your 10 grand, they're just, here's your certificate, out you go, right? Like you did your 200 commits, and which is a terrible metric, but some people do it. And communication is valuable because for early career devs, because you may not have 100% of the technical skills, but by having great communication skills, someone that I know I can put you on my team will like you. You have enough of the technical skills that I know you can fill in, the gaps as you go, kind of thing. I'd say is just as important, if not maybe slightly a little bit more important than the technical skills, right? Like coachability. I've heard this from thousands of, I don't exaggerate, hundreds of recruiters and hiring managers, right? That's what they say they're really looking for, right? Like I don't need perfection. I need to know that I can take someone and mold this person into someone that I can make an all-star team member. But it all starts with A, you needing to know a little bit enough to code and problem solve, and B, just being able to communicate with your team members on how to get better.
Yeah, I like that idea of coachability. I think I've probably heard that, but not really thought about it very much until you were talking about it just now. And I know for me and a lot of other developers who came out of self-paced boot camps, or for developers learning on their own, coachability is a skill that we don't talk enough about and that we don't really practice, right? Because what you're doing is you're learning independently, and that's great, right? It's great that you can go out there and find the resources that you need to accomplish the thing, right? But also you miss out on a lot of that communication. You miss out on being able to learn from other people and to ask questions while someone's telling you something. So if they're breaking down an issue for you and talking through it, then how do you know how to ask questions? And I know for me, that was a real big challenge. And sometimes it still is, because there's this, you've developed habits of staying in this world of, oh, well, my job is to go out and find the answers to those things myself, rather than like, let's start by asking questions that can get us halfway up this path, rather than having to start from zero and moving forward. Does that make sense?
Spot on, right? And it's exactly why I like communities like Virtual Coffee or created my own, because doing it alone is rarely the best decision, right? And this is personal experience for me. Not to go too far, but like I grew up in a household just do it yourself, right? Don't pay for that. Learn how to do it. Save $1,000 and do it yourself, right? And then, and I still do have this mentality, right? Like it's very hard for me to ask for help. I'm breaking through with that, but especially when you work solo I did consulting for 3-4 years, right? Like it's when you're alone, like you gotta learn a heck of a lot, right? Like me trying to be cheap and not pay for a $10 a month server has taught me so much about DevOps that like not enough, but just ways to save $5 a month in managing my own servers. And now as I look back, I'm like, that was really dumb. I could have just saved a lot of time. But but the idea of being surrounded by a positive community and asking for help and having that expertise on hand of, hey, this is what the real world's going to look like, this is what you should prepare for, or here's how collaboration looks with, how do you do PRs properly, right? Like I think you guys with the virtual coffee GitHub repo, right? Like it's teaching people, oh, I create this branch, I do this PR, it gets approved, right? That's a process that I think only half the boot camps I've interacted actually sit down. They'll give you a here's a link to how to do it, but as we all know as coders, right, it's always um, doing it over just consuming it, creation over consumption, as I call it, right? You got to do this stuff, not just read a blog post and expect to be able to walk out and say that was worth a graduation certificate kind of thing.
Yeah, I was to go back a little bit to the production ready part of it, right? And I've seen this a lot where people have the portfolio pieces, right? And they're just kind of linked on their portfolio, but maybe a couple of paragraphs or whatever. But when you, excuse me, when you are helping people take their portfolio piece to be production ready, do you find that that there's actually like holes in the project itself, or is it more like the stuff around it, the ops, the hosting, stuff like that you find that people are maybe not going all the way to get to production ready, or both?
It is a little bit of both, yeah. And I also add in, that there's holes, which is fine. I think people need to get over that. It's not going to be 1,000% perfect. I think some people fear like, oh, if I make this open source, they're going to see the code. I'm like, get over it, right? Like it's something as a talking point, right? I love using blemishes as a talking point of, oh, actually, let me point out my blemish for you and tell you how, if I had enough infinite time, I would fix it like this, but I actually don't have enough time because I'm working on my freelance side, right? There's definitely some holes. I would also add that it's just not pushing the envelope enough, right? Again, I'm taking a recipes app and I'm adding a little thing like this, right? Like, okay, well, how can we add design into it, right? Like, let's add in Tailwind and see how you like using that. So let's add in some, again, that wow factor that someone lands on. It's like, okay, this is polished, right? They actually, and not everyone you don't have to be a master designer. I teach people, or I do it myself, to just steal designs, right? Like I'll go on a different website, like, hey, that font pairing looks pretty nice. I'm going to use those exact same fonts, or this color scheme. Like I'm just going to use that. And I think by removing some of those analysis paralysis barriers, right? Like, oh, like design, I don't want to do design. Like stop thinking about it. Just go use something that works so that you can move on, kind of thing. Because I think it's a huge mindset barrier to hold people back when they don't feel like their thing's perfect. But I say embrace it and use that as a talking point of, this is why it's not perfect. You may not have noticed it, but I'll show you where I see my problems at.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
Yeah, me too. I like that kind of thinking. And, I've seen some people have like blog posts where they explain stuff like that, about their projects, about when they're on their like learning journeys and stuff. I always find that really, really valuable. As somebody who has, hired people or whatever, you know what I mean? It's like that idea of using, I don't know, kind of like you said, like using a hole in something, but like being aware of it and explaining why it's there or whatever, what you would do if you had the time, what you would do if or what you're going to do next, that kind of thing. I think that's great. That's a great idea.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to break things down into a process, and to also, that does a lot to show how you think through things, how you're able to talk about those things and communicate those things. And that just goes back to your point, like that's an underdeveloped skill in a lot of the developers that are coming into the industry right now.
Yeah. And this 1,000% applies to technical interviews, right? When being stumbled upon something, right? I went through the experiment of applying for a bunch of different jobs because I wanted to see if can I even do this, right? How can I teach people to get a job if I don't even know if I could get a job? And one of the things that I love kind of just bringing up to people is like during technical questions where it's something really stumps, like I always tell people just to laugh it off and be like, look, I have no idea. Like, or that's a really good question. I don't know the answer now, but let me kind of just stumble my way through and kind of just make it very lighthearted and playful. Like, let's pretend we're in this technical interview and they just ask something about some redonkulous searching, sorting algorithms. And I was like, look, I could sit here for 30 minutes and not give you a good answer. So let me just talk to you about how I would go through it and do what you said, Becca, like just kind of teach, like go explain your thought process around it. Because again, I would say that's also probably just as important, if not more important than the actual solution itself, kind of thing. And that's kind of the mindset I always give. Just like own everything you do. Like don't worry about all those little things like that. Own it, kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the things that a lot of technical interviews or interviews in general don't take into account is that you have the ability to ask questions in most of your workplaces, and you should be asking questions, right? And
Right.
so if you ask somebody, hey, just solve this thing that you've probably memorized because you've been studying for this technical interview, like what does that even show? But
Yeah.
to say, like, I think it is valid to say, okay, well, this is kind of how I would approach it. This is the question that I have for you because I feel like I might get stuck at this point. So, can you tell me how you would communicate that to me when I ask you this question? Push
Mhm.
back. I mean, but also I will say that I will not take a technical interview for those reasons because I don't think that they're valuable in
No.
most circumstances. And I think that they leave out so many underrepresented minorities in tech because of the type of preparation that has to go into them. And they don't account for the privilege that you have to be able to spend all of this time. So this is me getting on my soapbox again. And
Go
I'm going
for
to
it.
stop.
Come on. Back up.
But I also think, there's this is going back to a point that you said earlier about I can't remember exactly where it was coming from, but talking about this idea of learning on your own and how that's almost never the best way to approach learning how to code. For a lot of people, that's the only way,
Mhm.
unless you have community, though. And so this is something I keep going back to, and I keep thinking a lot about how to encourage this. But when you have community, collaborate with them in some way, right? Like participate in a study group or talk to some people and say, I would really like to be able to build a project together with you. And maybe it is a to-do app, right? But there's a difference between building a to-do app by yourself and building a
Mhm.
to-do app with 4 people. So I've kind of gotten in my mind that there's this like nice thing about groups of 4. I'm not exactly sure why, but for me, the approach is, finding those 4 people and forming your own cohort. And then you do, whether it's projects together or you walk through curriculum together, but in
Mhm.
the end, you're all collaborating and creating something that you can show, like, I worked as a team on this passion project. And that's more meaningful than working on something on your own.
Again, it ties to that whole, again, collaboration being part of production ready, right? If you're going to be thrown onto this team, I need to know that you can work with this team. And it gives great opportunities for during interviews, right? Like all those kind of cheesy scenario questions that interviews are. Tell me a time when you blank, right? Um, you don't have to lie anymore, right? Tell me about a time when you guys had a dispute in your team, right? Like you could have those discussions, have some ammunition ready to answer those questions. Like, oh, let me tell you about this group project that I had where, worked with this guy named Kevin. He had this idea of this, what the to-do list should be like, but we sat down and we talked it out. We used some proper, user stories, and we found out like, hey, maybe it's better to do it this way instead of that way. Um, that's all those experiences add up. And again, to your point, like you've got to do this with other people. Like it's such a tough journey already. At least we can do it together and share our losses and wins, kind of thing. And I like to again, I love checking in virtual coffee Slack. Like haven't been able to participate too much, but every night I'll open up and just see like people sharing. This is with the new stuff. I'm going to this interview. This one didn't go so well, but hey, there's next time. And everyone comes in, chimes in, right? Like it's nice knowing that people have your back. And I think that's important facet of going to the early career job hunt kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't even think it's limited to early career too, right? Like we've
Oh
had a
no, you're
lot
right.
of senior developers in virtual coffee move on to new positions in the last couple of months. And virtual coffee has played a role in that, even talking about salary negotiations
Uh-huh.
or, just cheering them on or saying, this was my experience in this position, or this other person that I I know did this thing. You might want to try it too. And that's allowed them to just kind of take that information, especially if they haven't been applying for positions in the last couple of years. If you've been in the industry for a while and you're interviewing for the first time in, I don't know, even 5 years, things have
Oh, the world's
changed a lot.
changed. Yeah.
So I know that, one of the challenges, we're talking about communication, right? And communication can be hard for people. So what are some of the different approaches that you take to kind of coaching people on how to communicate and to present themselves in an interview in a way that is, the person that you would want to have back for a second interview?
Gotcha. Yeah, good question. Um, it's a journey. I myself have gone through it. I'm super shy, I still am introverted, and that's not a problem. It's just that I was always very shy, always afraid to speak up, kind of always passive with when during, like, not even just interviews, in real life, right? Just business and relationships and everything. And that's wasn't fun. Let me say it that way, right? Life got a lot more fun once you're just allowed to talk and you be comfortable with talking, kind of thing. With interviews, rightfully so, a lot of people walk into with a lot of anxious energy, like, oh man, like, grimacing at the idea of, I've got to talk to this person for 30 minutes and it's going to be tough, right? And immediately that's a losing game, right? Immediately you walking into that is like just ultimate failure, right? And I always use this as an example, right? Like, imagine yourself going to those dreaded networking events, like you go to a network, like, no one, kind of thing. Imagine yourself walking into that same kind of room, just very anxious, like, I'm just gonna go sit in this corner and just kind of hold my drink by the bar, right? And that's super uncomfortable. I've been that person, still am, maybe. Um, Now imagine, stepping out that door and playing this mental exercise with me. Like, I always walk people through this because I think mindset is module 0 in my program, right? Like, you're not going to get far unless you get your mindset in the right space. You can't go through this whole experience, get one rejection, then just like go put the sheets over your head and like no, that's not how this is going to work in Tap into Tech, right? You got to keep chugging along. But back to the example right now, imagine if you walked into this networking event just knowing, like, you don't give a F about what anyone thinks, what anyone cares, what anyone says to you. Like, imagine like how lifted you would feel, right? Like, just like, whatever, I'm just going in and have fun. Like, I'm just gonna go there, meet people, I'm never gonna see these people again, blah, blah, blah. Let's go have fun. And you just walk in. So imagine how you envision yourself, like, I'm there just having fun. Like, that's the point. And I try to emulate this with people and get them into the right state, I call it. I'm borrowing from a lot of different psychology or NLP concepts that I've learned over my time. But, getting yourself in the right state, bringing your energy in, gets kind of wooey wooey at some point. Some people don't accept it as much as others. Some people do, and I lean into that, right? Like, bringing your energy, just imagine you're there to have fun. And that's the kind of energy that needs to be conveyed during your interviews, right? Not saying being super quirky, be super unprofessional, just like dancing on the table, just saying go in there, just like, look, I don't really care what happens at the end of this interview. I just want to get to know the company. Like, I just, not being tied to the result. I just want to come here and have an interview and have fun. And now imagine, again, flipping the script, right? I'm the interviewer and I see person A come in kind of anxious energy, like, yeah, I'm looking forward. Thanks for having me. Versus person B is like, hey, thanks for having me. Nice to meet you. Great office space. Like, let's have some fun. Like, tell me more about the company. It's kind of one of those hack ways of improving your chance at a job, right? Just being more likable. And again, I don't try to teach you being some wildly crazy extrovert. I'm just trying to teach you to be in a better state, right? You don't get stumbled when a tough question comes up. You do take those pauses. You do take those breaths. You don't freak out and then your brain gets, it's happened to me many times before where I've just, one bad question just kind of leads to a downfall. Nowadays, I'm able to catch myself. If it happens, I'm just catch myself and then bring my energy back up. And I actually visualize a dial, right? I think visualization mindset has been so important in my life. Shout out to Nick, who taught me all this, is one of my coaches, right? I visually see a dial, like, okay, I'm being a little too energetic. Let me dial it down and I'll speak a little bit slower. And my periods with a dot on it. But if I feel like the interview is getting up to a lull, I'll turn it up a little bit and kind of play along, kind of thing. And it's not an overnight thing, right? You can learn these through practice, which is, I don't know if you guys see, I always tell people, like, if you're in your early stage, um, or not, right, you just haven't interviewed in a while, or you're bad or not as good as you want to be at interviewing, there's literally free interviews out on LinkedIn, right? You do like one or two changes on your LinkedIn, recruiters are just bombing you with emails. And all you have to do is just reply back and say, sure, let's talk tomorrow. And boom, you have a free chance to have that experience that I was talking about at the bar, right? Where I can walk into this bar, not give an F about what person says to me, because it's just a random recruiter on LinkedIn, right? This person isn't going to go out there and say, don't hire Kevin because he didn't take this thing very seriously, which is what I did. I was going out on LinkedIn, just trying different tactics out, seeing which got good responses, and just kind of seeing how many interviews could I get to the next round. Um, and those are your reps, right? That's free batting practice right there. And I don't think people, if you're feeling like you're getting too nervous during interviews, go on LinkedIn and actually respond back to those spammy recruiters that say, hey, you want to talk? Like, I have this senior role position, even though I have 0 years of experience on my LinkedIn. I'm like, sure, let's talk just for fun. And that's how you get your reps in, right? It's not an overnight process. It can be a monthly process, and you'll get better incrementally. And by the time that dream job that I mentioned before does land right in front of you, you're ready to nail it.
I like that a lot. And I like this idea of like getting reps in. So as you're talking about this, I was thinking, so I like to, lift heavy weights and work out, but I really,
Yeah.
I like to jump high.
You too? I'm working on mine. I'm trying to hit a 60-inch box jump by the end of the year.
Yes, that's exactly where I was going with this. Okay, so I'm short,
Okay.
so I always say like I have to compensate for that in some way, and I jump high. And so I'm
Nice.
like trying to think of. I think I hit 50 inches, maybe
Nice.
56. I think maybe my highest is 56. But the point
Congratulations.
is,
Yeah.
it was work and it was reps, right? Like you're growing in strength. But one of the things approaching that box, like, okay, I'm 61 3/4 inches. And so that box is pretty high up on me. So when you're standing next to it, it's like, wow, this
Your
is
height.
really high. I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. And I had heard on a podcast somewhere, somebody was like, just visualize yourself doing it first, because if you set your mind up that you're going to fail, you will fail. And I was not a big visualizer person. I'm like, this is kind of garbage, but fine, I'm going to try it, right? And I like closed my eyes because I can't do anything with my eyes. I went, closed my eyes. I imagined myself jumping on the top of all of those boxes. And then I did. And I was like, okay, maybe there is something to this. But it is like when you go in with that failure mindset, you're not going to be able to perform in the way that you want to. And so there's something about imagining what it looks like and what it feels like. There's got to be some kind of like physiological reaction that
Absolutely there
happens
is.
when you do that.
Yeah. What is it? Mind over matter kind of thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's a saying for a real reason, right? Like, if you truly don't believe that you're going to do the best, then you're definitely not going to be right. Like, you're not going to be even at 50%, I'd argue, right? Like, or unless you just have all that reps and experience, which is, you don't have to visualize. You have what I call confidence through competence, right? You have the confidence through the fact that you've done it so many times. But we could rant on. I always do my correlations between exercise as well with like how job versus, I either do it with like dating life or however, exercise or business. All this stuff correlates together, right? Like, that's why mindset is module 0. Like, this will apply to not just your job hunt. This will apply to you landing on a 58 for a 56-inch jump, right? And on that note, they actually do teach that, right? Like, when you're doing a box jump, like, actually stand on the box, get used to that feeling of how high you are, kind of thing. Don't jump off of it, because that's just going to recipe for damaging over time, but actually stand up on top of it and feel how high you are off the ground, so that when you do the jump, you're not shocked when you get there and you can finish it. Don't fall backwards.
Yeah.
Like, you actually sit and then stand up, kind of thing.
Oh.
We got to do this, Rebecca. We got to
Yeah.
meet and just do box jumps over and over and over.
That's right. That's right. I keep saying, so Magnolia JS this year was online. Last year was online, but Kayla Sween organized it this year, and she's certified in like US powerlifting. She's got a
Nice.
certification. I'm like, next year when this is in a physical location, I'm going to come and we're going to lift heavy things together. So Kevin, you're in the general area. You're closer than I am in Ohio.
I'll make it somehow.
So-
Yeah, that's true. I am closer.
We'll find a way to
If
find
you're
a gym.
going there, Bekah, I have no excuse. Yeah.
Okay, so you said that you were doing coaching. You've kind of like always been doing this coaching thing. And so at some point it became like something that you really embraced and decided to take on and share with other people. And I feel like that could be a really scary decision to make. Was it just something that just came naturally, or did you think that, well, I've been doing this, I might as well do it in a more formalized way, and then just went from there?
Yeah. Reflecting back on it and feeling the emotions, right? It's anytime I do anything new, it's always a little bit of scary, right? Like I'm not someone I'm very risk adverse. Let me say that, right?
Same.
I tend to stop and think about it for 10 hours before even picking up a pen, kind of bad kind of thing. It's not good, but I'm working on it. But part of me has always been a little entrepreneurial. Like I said, like I always knew I was going to do something on my own. And I'm going to go ahead and just say it's probably just because of the surroundings, the people I was around, seeing people who are much more brilliant than me, much smarter. Like this is how they create their own happiness and wealth, right? Like I'll say it. I love money. So they create their own wealth and their own happiness and their own freedom and, creating their own business. So coaching definitely came in through my surroundings, my mentors. I am a big results and product of a bunch of mentoring and books and experiences and conferences and all these workshops, right? I've spent a lot on, investing in myself, which has given me the ability to say, you know what, I've seen all these other people do it. A lot of my idols, people I respect in the community, are doing it this way. I'm going to try it myself. And it was scary, but when you really break it down, it's the steps are simple, right? To start your own website, get your own first few clients, like, create a structure, create a program. It's simple, right? We could write it right now in like 1 or 2 minutes. The execution is always the scary part, right? Getting a job can be simple. The steps doing it are not easy sometimes though, right? So going through the step of, deciding I'm going to create my own, I was already consulting, doing my own like little private, website consulting. So coaching wasn't too far off. But there was a little bit of like, look, let me say it this way. I still get imposter syndrome to this day, right? Can I go out there and start my own coaching program, right? Like, can I message this person and convince this person I'm good enough, right? Like, it still happens to me. I think I call it you're a sociopath if you don't get a little bit of it. So I think you have to have a little bit of it because it's, and that's the good thing, right? I know I'm going the right direction. Let me say that, right? I know when this feeling is coming, it's something I should be doing, or I should try to challenge myself as kind of thing. And that's just the whole mindset behind it right now. You're reframing imposter syndrome. I'm getting it. This is okay. I should be getting this. And now I should continue on kind of thing. And that's what getting your reps in feels like.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot of pursuing what scares you.
Yeah.
Which is hard, especially, if you don't have a good support system or community around you. So I'm kind of taking this in a little bit of a different direction, but you've got all this experience working with a lot of different people. You've talked about taking interviews and trying different things out. So if you looked at tech right now and you saw what the interview process looked like, and you could totally reset it, and from here on out, everybody would just follow Kevin's way, what does Kevin's way of interviewing look like?
On the interviewee side, like if I'm trying to get a job?
No, from the interviewer. Like if you're like,
okay,
the process of, the tech interview process is like, feels kind of messed up to a lot of people, I think. So,
yeah,
you probably have a unique perspective having seen both your own and, your mentees, going through the process. So what can we do to fix it?
This is an interesting question. I'm going to think about it, and ideas are going to flow to me as I'm talking. I have some ideas. So, I think with the idea of remote being very, very important nowadays. I think everyone's got to kind of learn a little bit better, be better on camera, right? Sadly, Zoom's kind of the way. I don't love it, love or hate. I love working remote, but at the same time, I think I don't want to fully embrace a world where we always have to stare at a camera. But as an interviewer, I want to make sure that person's comfortable communicating on camera as well, right? So to be able to convey ideas in this challenging times of how well can you work remotely kind of thing. Um, I like the idea of structured interviews, as in if we had 1,000 applicants, every single 1,000 of these applicants would be asked the exact same questions. Because I think the idea, and shout out to Test Double, right? They did this during my interview. One of the companies that did this to me was Test Double. You get to talk, as much as you want, and you have very structured rubric of what we're looking for, kind of thing, right? Because otherwise, if you have, what was it, King of the Hill, they had two football fans, right, talking, right? Like if they hit it off talking about football, ideally, like that person might not be the best fit, but because they kicked off so well, like that person got the check mark, kind of thing, and that's very subjective. So I think we kind of have to have these metrics, like very standardized questions where everyone gets asked that. Other ideas, let's see. We're seeing this big movement of almost anonymous applications of like you don't see the age, the race, the gender, or anything, kind of thing. That is something I think phase one needs to have. I think there's almost this screen that doesn't show, does this person look like me? Does this person have the same background as me, in order to pass the test, kind of thing. I think that's super important as part of
I
phase
just
one of
want to
Kevin's
pause
interview.
for 1 second there.
Yeah, sure.
I know, like, I put you on the spot with this question, but I want to
No
push
worries,
back
yeah.
a little bit. So I like one of the things that I think about. I don't have my mind made up about this, right? Like I think that it's very interesting to have this idea of like blind resume reviews, but at the same time, there comes a certain privilege with what gets put on a resume, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for people who haven't had the same privileges, who have not had the same advantages of people that are growing up with parents who have connections or who have money, then somebody who has worked really hard to get where they are, maybe there's a different way to address this on a resume that I'm just totally missing. But I could see their resumes being not at the top of the pile just because they haven't had the same opportunities. And I don't really, I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but I just
Not at all,
wonder
no.
if there's ways to capture that and to allow you to move forward in processes that haven't done a really good job of taking that into consideration.
And here's the response I could come up with that, right? It's not just resumes in stage one, by the way. Let me make that clear, right? There are not even a cover letter, but just certain questions that they can tell, does this person have good written communication as well? One interview I did last year, man, it was, I think, almost 15 individual questions. It was a great company, 15 individual questions of like, typing out almost a paragraph each. I got through with that interview based on just those written things, right? Like, because again, kind of revisiting back on the idea of remote work, like, can you communicate well through written? Like, can you convey your idea of how this code works through just Slack messages, kind of thing? So on top of the resume, and I'm actually not a fan of resumes. Let me say it that way. like I think people put way too much weight on a resume. It is very true. Recruiters really do only spend 5 to 10 seconds looking at them. I've asked this amongst dozens of people, and it is very true. So if you're like just lacking that experience, or not putting in the right spot that's eye appealing, right? It's a big thing I always draw to. It does suck that unfortunately you're gonna get thrown out, kind of thing. Ideally, people would use that in tandem with certain questions that can kind of, again, going back to, hey, this person touched on this idea. This person mentioned his or her experience in this world, right? And that kind of ticks them off to the next phase, kind of thing. It's a very tough question because I've been thinking about this a lot before. And it works for some organizations where they do have the resources to sit down with, let's just say 100 applicants, if not thousands of applicants, and can kind of do it. unfortunately, the kind of world we live in where it's super busy, right? We have to have these certain. It's the same way I feel about standardized tests, right?
Yeah.
Like people, you have to take the SAT or ACT kind of thing. But what is there a better way to do it that can scale? Sadly, I don't think there's too many good solutions out there that would scale, but that's kind of the world we live in. I'm not embracing it. I'm not saying I kind of say screw that and don't get your job through the application process anyway. But given like you have to go through the
Yeah.
application process, yeah, ideally it's not just your resume. It's you're answering some certain questions, then you move on to some sort of 20 minutes, let's get to know you kind of phone call kind of thing. And again, depending on the role, like is communication vital? Like in a agency where you're consulting with your clients, well, can you pass these markers? Or is it okay that you're just working with your team of 8 people, developers, and you're good enough to work with just these 8 kind of thing? Those are kind of things that I would kind of look for. Um, Really drawn out, not pretty vague answer I'm giving so far.
Well, it's a kind of a hard. I'm like, hey, redo all the interview process right here, right now, in 5 minutes. Go.
I will say, I will share one tip that has worked pretty well with me. Again, I'm just experimenting. Let's see what works if I throw in a video application.
Yeah.
So I would actually record using a tool called Loom, just record a 2-minute video. And I see a nod in your head, like I love Loom. I use it all the time. They just lower down the free tier though, so I gotta go bump it up. But I actually would record a Loom video and let it link whatever, and I would send it to people on the application, like, hey, by the way, like if you want to see my video application, I recorded a 1 or 2 minute video explaining why. Like that little extra effort got me so many more results, like so many more, like, hey, loved your video, like let's talk kind of thing, let's set up an interview call. And this was back when I didn't have as much experience, right? So I would just use Loom, link it to like thekevintrong.com / company name, have that redirect to the Loom video, and voila, you're standing out the 99th percentile.
Yeah.
Like no one's doing that, so you're really sticking out kind of thing. And not saying that's part of my ideal world, because you got to respect your time. So those videos take a long time.
Yeah. There was a thread on Twitter, and I'll link it in the show notes, but Dustin McCaffrey was talking about working on Upwork, and that's what he was doing. He was sending looms to people, and he had little experience, but he set his price to $100 an hour, but it was enough that, I think he said the first job he made $85 an hour, but he was pretty new, and that's I think a pretty good hourly wage. And it all came because there was this personalized, I think it was personalized, but this Loom message. And it was something that differentiated him and built instant credibility with the people who were viewing it, which is, I think like taking risks and chances like that, and kind of what you're talking about, can be the thing that separates you from everyone else.
That's really fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. Because again, it kind of proves it's not just it works for me. It works for Upwork, which you're going globally competing against people. So, and to get a gig through that is fantastic.
Well, we're kind of getting close to the end, I think, of our time. So I love the thing that stuck out to me most is the visualization step, that you were talking about, that idea. Do you have any other sort of general large idea chunks of advice for people starting out the interview, or I guess in the interview process, in any way?
Yeah. On the idea of visualization and mindset, that stuff is just, again, module 0 for me, because it's the stuff that's going to differentiate you more than most people, right? Like you can't just get hit once, knock down, and call it quits kind of thing. Another trick of that I've learned through someone else, if you're feeling this anxiety during interviews or before an interview, right? Imagine being hugged by your most favorite person in the world, right? That warmth that just kind of comes over you. Again, Becky, you're right, it gets wooey, kind of like in this weird world of people like, that's so BS. Once you try it, right? It's the whole, power pose, like just standing out with your arms over your head and giant grinning smile, right? You can't help but feel great, right? So before I would go into interviews, I would go and hype myself up in the bathroom doing these little tricks. Before this podcast, I was kind of getting sure I wasn't like a hot mess, which I'm sure I am. But let's see, other tricks or general advice. it's the big concept I love to teach is that getting a job interview, or I'm sorry, getting your tech job can be a lot of fun. There's a wrong way to do it, which is what I see maybe 60-70% of people doing it. They play it as a numbers game, which is like, I have to apply to 20 jobs by the end of the week. I'm like, that's so silly, right? Like, how about you apply to just 3 jobs and give it your best effort on each of those 3? Because you're going to get a lot further than just doing a blanketed application process, which I see a lot of people do. They don't, they use the same resume, they use the same cover letter, they kind of just copy and paste things, which is fine. You've got to do that eventually. But I always tell people, if given 1 week and you had the option between spending 5 hours applying to 10 jobs or 5 hours applying to 2 jobs, I'd always pick the 2 jobs. And that may not sound like a lot. It is a lot of time for some people, but apply for the job, find networks around it, find connections, go on LinkedIn, message people, say, hey, I just applied for this job. Like, let me know like what your thoughts are, kind of thing. And just having those fun conversations. And that's what I mean by getting the job interview can be fun, right? I've done it before. I've enjoyed the process. I've enjoyed meeting random people. I've enjoyed just walking out, not caring if I got the job or not. And that's the great mentality when you're not tied to the idea of, man, this is my last hope. If I don't get this job, I don't know what I'm going to do, right? Like, remove all of that. Just say, you know what? It wasn't meant to be. Let's move on to the next adventure experience, right? Because I'm sure y'all too can attest to this, is that all these little experiences have built you up to who you are today. And those were necessary, right? There was a lot of great experiences, a lot of not so great ones, but they made you who you are today. And embracing that, it's kind of a very stoicism kind of like approach to it. You've got to go through those challenges in order to come out. And by framing it as a fun challenge, framing it as, oh, well, let's see what happens, right? You can make it a lot of fun. It doesn't have to be a dreadful process. You can really get a lot out of it and see not yourself just grow in your tech career, but also just personal development wise. You can be a lot happier not getting 8 rejection letters, only getting 2, but then like, hey, how can I learn and improve on those 2 versus got another one, hit delete and just kind of move on, right? Stop, reflect on it. What can we do to improve that process? So I think that's probably my next biggest point, right? Like, the way you're applying for jobs can be really fun and enjoyable. So you can choose the painful way, or you can choose a way that you're going to grow. Guaranteed. I guarantee if you follow certain steps, you will become a better person on the end. You may not get a job, but you will be ready for the next one. I guarantee it.
I love that. I love that idea of it's personal growth, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's excellent. So thank you so much, Kevin, for sharing all of this with us. There's so many great things that practical tips and advice and things that people can go through. So we really appreciate you sharing this with us here today.
And I thank y'all too. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I had a good time.
All right. Thanks, Kevin.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Virtual Coffee Podcast. This episode was produced by Dan Ott and Bekah Weigel and edited by Dan Ott. If you have questions or comments, you can hit us up on Twitter at virtualcoffeeio, or you can email us at podcast@virtualcoffee.io. You can find the show notes, plus you can sign up for our newsletter to find out what Virtual Coffee's been up to on our website at virtualcoffee.io.
Please subscribe to our podcast and be sure to leave us a review. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.